You went through this process, which is a every 5-year re-accreditation that occurs through what we used to think of as SACS, or the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools. And then at that time, when I was here 5 years ago, it was Advanced Ed, and now it has been changed again, and the name is Cognia. And so I'm happy to be back and to work with y'all as you start this process, which you've already started. So are you going to be able to pull it up, the presentation? Are you going to pull it up? And y'all, I do want this to be engaging and conversational with you. If you have questions, just let me know and we can stop and try our best to answer them. There we go. So I want to point out at the beginning of this that this is a continuous improvement journey. It's should not be looked at as like an event as much as it is as something that we continuously work to improve. So if you can kind of keep that in mind, it's a continuous improvement process. And I'm going to go ahead with the next slide. And these are our learning targets for the day. Kind of what I want to accomplish is to give you this Cognia accreditation process overview. Like, what is it? What's it going to look like? How am I involved in it? Introduce the Cognia domains and the standards. Understand the connection between the Cognia standards and the I3 rubric. And I have a handout here that we'll be using. And I'll show you how the staff is going to be using that as we work through this process. Introduce and demonstrate the use of it. We're going to take one of the standards and kind of walk you through how that would look and how our staff is going to be doing that. Introduce and interpret the standards and key concepts, and introduce the performance standards worksheet, which the schools will be working with, and there's one for the district. And your visit, your engagement review is scheduled for October, and Dr. Brink is the kind of the contact person for the district, so she has already started the process. You have to start early with it, so I think you're right where you need to be at this point. So when you hear about the whole process, I think you'll be pleased with what's been done so far. So those are our goals for today. But first, I'd like to have you introduce yourselves. I know you know each other, but kind of introduce so I know who's at the table. And I recognize some faces from board members who were here the last time I worked with you. But if you could just give us your name, tell us why you serve on the school board, what prompted you to throw your name in the hat and run for the school board, and then also maybe something that your fellow board members may not know about you. Okay? Something interesting, so maybe a hobby or something that you that they may not know about you. And I'll just let whomever wants to go first. And don't everybody speak up at one time.
Mike, you on that side, you closest.
Yeah, you get the honor since you came in late.
I done forgot what all he asked for. Y'all know I struggle in these
Yeah,
meetings.
it's up there, your name and why you're on the board.
I'm Mike Hughes,
Mike.
District 4. Started out on the board because of tax concerns. Now, I kind of understand how it works, and I have children in the district, so I'm going to stay on a while.
Yes, very good.
Something they don't know about me, I don't know, a lot of them knows too much about me. I play guitar. Some of them don't know that.
Did y'all know that? Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hughes. Ms. Ware?
Susan Calhoun Ware. I serve on the board because of my love for children. My past job before retirement was working with the Department of Social Services in Child Protective Services as a supervisor. And I don't know what they don't know about me, and that's fine. I don't know. I just like to cook, pretty freelance.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
And Ms. Little?
My name's Kathy Little, and I chose to run to be a part of the board. I have 3 daughters in the district, and I was just intrigued with what was going on with their education, wanted to be a part of it. And something that they may not know about me is that I am petrified of water. So,
Hey, thank you. Mr. Varner.
Yeah, my name's Todd Varner. I serve on the board because I'm a parent. I've taught in the college level, a spouse of an employee of the district, and also when I ran, I was in the hiring position for hiring college grads for the most part. So I get see it from all four different angles there. Something folks here probably don't know is one of my favorite things to do is make fudge. I know Dr. Thomas knows that because I brought her some over the holidays, but I do like to make some. I've got strawberry shortcake batch at the house right now that I'll probably go back and eat.
Well, you have to share that recipe with us.
I should have brought some.
Yeah. Thank you. And Mr. Carpenter.
Yeah, my name is Anthony Carpenter, and I've been on the board a while, and I serve, because of my love and understanding of children and things that people not know what means that I'm a music lover.
Okay, very good. Well, I guess something you may, I'm a music major. I was a music major at Lander. I taught band for 13 years, and then I went into administration, and I've been in administration since 1995. I was assistant principal, high school principal, superintendent, and I've been in this position, which is back in my home county now, for 13 years. And I'm, involved in lots of initiatives around the state and worked with a lot of different districts. So I'm happy to be here, and again, I thank y'all for that.
What year were you at Lander?
I was there from 78 to 82.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Miss me
He
by
was there
there.
with my sister,
Who was your sister?
Miss Faulkner, the principal at the high school. She was come in about 82.
Okay. I enjoyed my time there, met lots of folks.
I enjoyed my time.
And actually now I was just elected to serve on the board of trustees for Lander back in September.
Okay. Because Tony Abel ran for that position also.
Right now,
Yeah.
she ran against Jim Schubert.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was
She was
before,
asking,
right.
seeking a seat there.
Just came out right.
Because
Yes.
I knew Maurice Holloway, good friend of mine.
Oh, yes.
We were there at Lander together. That was in the early 70s, though.
Right.
Of course.
And he was just named board member emeritus by the board.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
So-
Okay. Wonderful guy. Wonderful gentleman.
Yes. Served on the board ever since it became a state college.
Yes.
So-
Yes.
Well,
And
thank
they
y'all
have to
so
finish in
much.
there.
Yes, ma'am. And I appreciate it. Y'all, that may be a question you're asked. I'm going to talk to you about who all's involved in this process as we go through and what is your role as the board, or you'll see it referred to in some of the standards as the governing body, and you are the governing body. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but that question is a pretty common question by a review team member that comes in. They want to know, why are you running for the board? They'll want you to know, they'll want to know if you understand what is your role, governing body of the district, and I'll talk a little bit about that, and hopefully I'm going to be able to pull up some other questions and talk to you about that. But what do we want to get out of this? Why are we doing it? It's a lot of time, it's a lot of effort and a lot of people involved. And what happens is a report that presents the findings about the institution, or in this case, the system, the school district, related to these standards, and other measures along with suggestions for next steps for the institution, because again, it's about continuous improvement. And every district has room for improvement. Y'all are a very good district, very solid district. You have been for a long time. I remember when I worked with you before. You did really well. I think the board at that time and the superintendent at that time and his leadership team, the community, I think we're very pleased with the results. And I think that'll be the case this time. But just keep in mind, it's about continuous improvement. If they came in and did a review and walked away with no recommendations, no commendations, it really would be pointless, okay? So who participates in the cognitive review? The schools do. All the schools rate themselves using the cognitive standards. I'm going to share with you this document that's called a Performance Standards Worksheet for schools. Your schools have actually already completed this. And I was just talking with Dr. Brink, And there's a chance that you might go back and do that again to see what it looks like before we submit everything. The district rates itself using the cognitive standards, so you've got the schools doing it, each individual school, and then you have the district doing this process. And y'all, there's there's 3 domains that all the standards fall under. And there used to be just 5 standards, and underneath those were indicators. Now all of the indicators have become standards. And so there's a lot of them. There's probably 40 to 50 different pieces you have to rate times, and I'll show you this using this rubric. So there's hundreds of decisions is what I'm trying to get to that have to be made using this rubric that we're going to share with you about the district and where you are. Who provides input? The teachers do, the students do, the parents, the administrators, the curriculum and instructional leaders in the district, the community members, and the board members. So you can see it's very comprehensive. We want to make sure that we include a lot of folks in this process. And so in other words, it's everybody. Everybody in the community, whether they have children in the district or not, they are a stakeholder in this process, in this school district. Yes, sir.
Do you take the students all the way through, or is there a cutoff at the age? Or?
No, elementary students are actually interviewed as well.
Good.
And of course the questions are geared toward elementary age group. Usually 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade students are interviewed. And they don't interview from every school students. There'll be kind of a cohort of students that are selected from around the district. And your review will be a virtual review, which I want to talk about. That's very different than what normally happens with a face-to-face review. So this is the best way to look at this. And it works best if it's perceived as an opportunity to learn about us, what can we do, where are we. These standards are world-class standards. These standards are used to accredit schools all over the world. Cognia has schools that, throughout the world that are accredited by Cognia. So it's something that you don't have to do. It's extra, it's above and beyond. I can tell you in South Carolina now it may be out of the 81 school districts, several years ago, there were only about 5 that were not accredited. And you're seeking accreditation for the district, where the whole district is accredited. Back in the day, some school districts would just choose for their high school to be accredited. But now, I think all but 4 or 5 districts in our state, the entire district is accredited. So, it's just a commitment to excellence on your part. To ensure that you have world-class schools. But perceive it as an opportunity to learn, a chance to see the forest, a helpful appraisal. It's not a gotcha. And it's not a we have to be perfect situation. It's about that constant, consistent, continuous improvement. And so what happens, when the team, it's called the engagement review team, comes in, and they've done their work, and the next step is the accreditation status, and the team that will be visiting you will make a recommendation, and they will let you know what that recommendation is when they leave, but it still has to be approved by the Cognia Global Commission, and they meet throughout the year, and so whenever yours fall in the fall, there will probably be a meeting in the fall, later after that, or in the winter, and then y'all will be notified of what the official status is. Accredited is what you are now, and you could be accredited under review. There's accredited under conditions, and so we don't anticipate any of that. Most of the school districts who take this on have done it before and been accredited for years. They maintain their accreditation, and you will be prepared. And you will be able to tell your story. And part of this is about telling the story of Lawrence School District 55. And you will receive a score. It's called the Index of Education Quality. And it's from a 100 to a 400-point scale. And the team, when they're here, they will use a program where they enter their findings, and it will calculate that score. The average score, I think, is around 250 to 270, I think, for all districts in the Cognia network. So that will be, the last time you did this, I'll tell you this, I was taking my district, Spartanburg School District 7, through the same process, and I was working with District 55, and back when I did it that last time, I came every month or so, sometimes a couple times a month, and met with everybody and facilitated that. Your IEQ score was higher than my district's. My superintendent questioned me about that, but I said, well, it is what it is. You know, and both of the scores were within a close range of each other, but that just tells you, like, on average, there's no cutoff score for accreditation. It's just another piece of information to let you see, well, we did really well. How did we do, you know, looking at this scale? So that is something that you will receive when the exit review happens. Checkup. So I want to ask you real quick, if somebody asks you, they hear in the community that we're going through Cognia accreditation process, what would you say to them? Why are we doing that? Anybody?
To make our schools better.
To make our schools better.
Kids better.
Because it's about that continuous improvement, to make our schools better. Excellent. Cognia performance standards. The standards are specific to the type, the schools and the district. You're in the system, and so those standards are very specific to what is considered to be best practices, and at each type of institution. The standard sets are around 3 areas, which I mentioned to y'all a minute ago, and it's leadership, learning, and resources. And those 3 pieces are so important about this to the success of a school district. The leadership, from the top down to the school level leadership, the learning that's taking place, how do we assess, how do we measure, how do we know students are growing, and then the resources. School districts vary in the terms of the resources that they have, but with the resources that we have, are we using those to maximize learning? Because the heart of the district's teaching and learning. So those are the 3 domains that all the standards are based on. And then each standard with it has a key concept, which we can talk about when I give you this handout in just a few minutes. And these are kind of definitions that our folks will be working with. Of course, the data, reports and charts and graphs and tables that represent the results of assessments and surveys and other tools that we use to collect. And we want to see as much as possible over several years. I will share this with you. All school districts have a lot of data. It's not hard to find the data. What you're looking for here and with the standards is, what do we do with it? It's almost like we give an assessment, we have the data, we look at it, and we say, now what? The now what is the most important piece. What do we do to use the data to help us improve? And then information, you know, you're gonna, the synthesis and analysis of it, written and verbal data. If I'm a team member coming in from the outside, I will get all the information on your school district 30 days in advance. And we'll have probably a 5-member team. So 30 days in advance, each one of those team members will have a chance to look at everything you submit, and we're going to talk about what you submit in just a few minutes. And so they will have an idea, they're trained on the standards of what this district is like before they get here. But no decisions are made until they get here. And when I say get here, this will be virtual, and they will be assigned to you for that period of time virtually. But how we use it is so important, and I would just advise you on this. Make sure it's very apparent on how we're using our data, because that's a huge part of this process. Other definitions: evidence, selected information used to base decision on standards, ratings, and themes. So if we rate ourselves, you know, a 4, which is the highest, and 1 is the lowest rating, or we rate ourselves a 3 or a 2, how do we know it? How do we know that that is where we are? What evidence do we have to support that? And also with the evidence, you need to think sometimes less is more. Years and years ago, some of you may remember that, I mean, they spent months preparing documents and crates and boxes identified. That was before all the technology, and the team literally came in a room like this would be filled with documents. And if they had a chance, they would go through and look at some of them. That's not the way we do it anymore. We'll upload everything, of course, it'll be digital, but just the evidence that supports what we're saying as we tell our story, we don't need a whole lot. Sometimes a couple of things, and that's all we need to support it. If the team needs more evidence, they will ask the person in charge, we see this in your reports, but we don't see any evidence. Can you get us the evidence? And you should be able just to get it for them and provide it for them. Is how that works. The findings are the statements that reflect your review and analysis of the evidence. These are statements of facts and the analysis of those facts. The suggestions, statements that provide direction on possible next steps. And I'll talk to you about how they're going to give you recommendations and commendations, and then they're going to the commendations on the last protocol were called powerful practices, things that they really think you do well. They want to point those things out. And then here are some things that we recommend you take a look at. Okay, and before I get into this next part, I wanted to mention to you, well, I think I'll get to that later, about the team and the makeup of that team. So the standards, performance standards worksheet, which is what this document is, and I'm just going to give you this very quickly.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
This is a document that I mentioned earlier that the schools have actually already completed. And if you see how this works, if you flip over to the second page, you see 1.7. And the standard is leaders implement operational processes and procedures to ensure organizational effectiveness in support of teaching and learning. So with this, you will have the standard, you will have a key concept listed under that as to what it is, you know, we're looking for. And the best way to approach this is you turn it into a question as you work through it. And the next piece is this rubric, which I want to give you a copy of. And again, y'all, this is just to give you as the board an overview of what's taking place and how this is being done in your schools. It's not something that you will need to monitor or keep up with. The staff, administrators will be doing that. So I wanted you to see that the statements and the definitions have to, what's in that first document I gave you and what's in this rubric that I just gave you, these are linked. And there's a lot of documents that are to help the administrators and others in the building and at the district level lead the district through this process, but these are two of the most essential that I wanted to share with you. And this just gives you some information about how it's set up, and I'm going to let you work with that in just a second. So how do we determine where we rank in terms of meeting the cognitive standards? This rubric that I just gave you is a big part of that process. So using the I3 rubric, how do you rate? And using this impact pyramid, which I was on one side of the handout that I just gave you. And it's good to know, y'all, what we're striving for is impact. If you look at the rubric across the top, there's the three areas. It's initiate, it's improve, and impact. We're trying to get to impact. You know, what are we doing that actually is creating impact in a positive way? I will tell you that the teams are trained to sort of look at these in quartiles. So no evidence would be like the first quartile that's not on here, okay? It's just nothing is supported there. Initiate means you're in that next quartile. Improve is the next, and impact you're in the top quartile. That's just sort of a reference point you have in those three upper headings. And then you've got these engagement, implementation, results, sustainability, and embeddedness. So if I go to the next activity here, I want you to look at the words in the definitions on this rubric and the 4 levels, and I want you to tell me what you see is different. If you start, for example, under engage, is the level of involvement and frequency stakeholders are engaged in the desired practices, processes, and programs. And then this is level 1, would be rating of a 1, rating of a 2, a 3, or a 4. So if we're at level 1, few stakeholders are involved in support of the desired practice or program. If you go to the next level, some stakeholders are frequently involved in support of the desired practice or program. If you go on down to the level 3, many stakeholders are involved, and then the final one is most stakeholders. Okay? So that's, if you look at each one of these under implementation, results, sustainability, and embeddedness, it's the same wording you'll see as you move toward the top level of where you want to be. It's more inclusive, okay? So we usually move from that few to some to many to more or most. It used to be all, and everyone who was doing this and the folks that were facilitating it, really, that was a challenge because regardless of what you do, having to assure that all are doing it is a really heavy lift. So I think this works better for us as we go through. And so thinking about just what I want you to know, what we want to get out of this today is what your staff, your community folks, what's going to be happening when they go through this and using this to rate ourselves. And then the big piece about once you make that decision, how do you know? What evidence do you have that tells you that? And y'all, sometimes in these teams will come in and they are devoted to looking at this and being very accurate and gathering information and giving you feedback that's going to help you with that continuous improvement. That sometimes, you know, you might have rated yourself a 2, and they'll come back and say, no, we saw the evidence to here to where we think you're probably a level 3, you know, and that's a good thing if that happens. But let the evidence you have drive the decisions that you make when you're making these decisions, or the staff is doing this. So level 1, domain 1 is leadership. And I want you to look at your school performance standard. I want you to read the standard. We're going to determine what the standard is addressing. We're going to think about how well, you know, we think we do with it, and then we're going to analyze from what information would support the rating. This is the process that is gone through with every one of these standards, okay? And with every one of them, we have to make a decision on the engagement, the implementation, the resource, the sustainability, and the embeddedness. So that's when I've talked about hundreds of decisions being made. So if you look on the performance standards document, you look on the second page, and at the bottom, and I'm just going to walk you through this, and y'all, if you have questions, let's stop and talk about it. 1.3 says the institution engages in a continuous improvement process that provides evidence including measurable results of improving student learning and professional practice. Okay, so that is the standard that we're looking at. And then, of course, the key concept, what is it that we're looking for? And you look through, if you flip the page, engagement of internal stakeholders in data-driven decisions and collaborative process for continuous improvement. Now, if we were actually going through this process, we would talk about the stakeholders, who are the stakeholders, how are they engaged, what stakeholders are engaged, what data do they use, you know, and then we would come up with a rating based on looking at this rubric, okay? So that's what this process is going to look like. Then you would move on to the next part of it, which is the implementation and the development of the continuous improvement plan that contains specific goals, strategies, activities, and measures based on identified needs from the review of multiple forms of data. Now, if I'm a team member, when I'm looking right there, I'm looking to see in the first piece who all was involved. The second piece, I'm looking to see, okay, what came out of that, and do their goals align with what the data tell us. And then the next piece of it, the results, collecting data and analyzing the data. You know, basically results of the continuous improvement process consistently and clearly communicated to all representatives, internal and external stakeholder groups. So you keep seeing the word stakeholders show up, okay? So how many were involved? How were they involved? What did they look at to make their decision? And now what are the results? I need to get back to those people that are involved because they're all stakeholders. And then the longitudinal results. What does it look like over 3 to 5 years? And I think in 55, y'all are still using MAP, is that correct?
Yes.
So you've got years of MAP data. A lot of districts have switched to various assessments, and it's a little more challenging to look at longitudinal data. And you know, our state assessment has changed, and then with the whole COVID year, you know, reliability is a challenge. So, you know, what does that longitudinal data look like? And then embedded, we're looking at, y'all, that embeddedness, if you were at the top of embeddedness, if you look at that rubric, the desired practice or program is deeply ingrained and protected throughout the culture and the operations of the institution. I mean, it is obvious that it is embedded, it's in everything that we do. So their ongoing commitment to the success of the continuous improvement plan is evident throughout the institution. Now, how would I know that? I've got to figure out what am I gonna use as my evidence to support that. So that one process that we just went through for a school or the school district, every one of these standards, that process has to happen. And I just gave you a quick overview. If we were really doing that, we would talk about it. We would pull data and look at it and make a decision based on the evidence on each one of those pieces. And once all of that is done, that's ready for, you know, our report, okay? So I want to stop here, and I just want to ask y'all real quick, because I'm going fast, and I want you to be able to ask questions. What are your thoughts right now? And I'm going to ask you again at the end, because we're going to learn a little bit more. But like right now, what you just heard, you've heard about the standards, you've heard about it's all about continuous improvement, the evidence, how we use the rubric, looking at these standards. What are your thoughts? It can be anything. It can be, I think this is a little overwhelming. I think there's a lot of work to do. I think it's a great process. What are your thoughts?
Just for me, I think in general, it's quite an undertaking for the stakeholders, whoever's going through this actual process to actually pull the information together. So I have a question. What timing, like, do we start this process from the time that we start to the time that we wrap things up? You mentioned in October.
Right. Well, actually, the process here in District 55 has already started.
Right.
Yeah. So the schools have completed this document in its entirety. And then the next step would be the district completing it, gathering your evidence, going back and revisiting it. There's surveys that you can choose to do. So I guess to answer your question is, it starts back so we have plenty of time to do it. And like, you know, sometimes schools will take this, they'll do something like this annually, just for their own purpose. And as we move forward with this new, and it is a new protocol, you know, it's always been about continuous improvement, but now there are more choices with how you do things in a district than there used to be. And so you could do this, have your schools do this every year, which is what I'm planning to do in District 7. We're going to do this probably every year, a small team. The year before it's time for us to go, then we'll hit it a little harder. But if we don't do something like that each year as we move forward, now I'm talking about moving forward because this is a new protocol, then how can it be continuous improvement? And then also too, other pieces of evidence that you have that are also about improvement that we normally do, The teacher surveys, the parent surveys that are done for the school report cards and the South Carolina accountability system and all of that, that's ongoing evidence, so we can pull those things in. But I think right now, and Dr. Brink and I were talking, we feel like that where you are right now with having completed this, you're at a good place to pace it, so when that team comes, everything is ready. And good question, very good. Other questions or thoughts?
I'll just be open and honest with it. I'm a little skeptical whenever I hear someone say continuous improvement.
Yeah.
Because it's always steps forward and steps back, and it's a give or take. And knowing physics and things tend to go toward disorder, not order. So
Right.
it really is more of a battle to keep things in order, you know. And so, to me, continuous improvement is some of those business buzzwords that this has got a lot of. So I'm pretty skeptical about that. I think it's a good thing. I like your tool.
Right.
I like the fact that, hey, it gets deeper and deeper and deeper as you go from left to right. It's a good. I use this all the time in engineering for decision making, and I think it's
Right.
a good tool. But just to be honest, I am a little. It gives me a little sour taste when I hear all the buzzwords. But that's just me.
Yeah, and part of this process is to get everybody using the same terminology, and so that when we talk about continuous improvement, what does that mean? And I think Mr. Carpenter said it means about getting better. You know, we want to get better, and everybody wants to do that. And you know, we love to see improvement. You know, incrementally, we're steadily improving. And sometimes we have a dip, and sometimes things happen, and so that's to be expected. But what do we do in reaction to it? You know, I think when we all come back after COVID, I was looking at data with some of my colleagues this morning, and I'm not putting a whole lot into what I'm seeing, because we had 2,800 students doing virtual, and we had kids doing face-to-face, and we started hybrid. And now this assessment, what I'm really anxious to look at is in the fall, when the majority of them are back, and we give that same assessment that I use as a benchmark. So those are the kind of things that may vary and happen. But the continuous improvement, I think, and I understand your concern with that, is just striving, constantly striving to get better.
Yeah, I think that would be a better word.
Yeah.
Striving toward the goal or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Again, I think some school districts change off a map just so that they don't have to be rated. So they get a new standard to start over. You know, but
Well, this protocol changes every few years too.
Yeah.
And part of that can be mind-boggling, but it's based on the research at the time. And they have been, this protocol, the first year, a lot of input went back to Cognia, and it changed for the better. So that's continuous improvement. But good point. Yeah, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move on, and there's going to be time for y'all to ask questions. And I know you have a board meeting after this, and I want to give you a chance to have a breather before that happens. Okay, so what will the actual engagement review look like? This year it'll be virtual. I've served on 3 virtual teams this year. I wanted to really know from a variety of schools and districts what that looked like and what it felt like. And it does work. It's like anything else. You know, we've learned some things during this year of COVID in terms of how to meet and work remotely. And I was asked by a reporter in Spartanburg, they asked the question, what will you keep that you have had to experience this year? And one thing is, depending on what I need to know from folks, I believe face-to-face meetings like we're in right now, we're interacting with each other, we can read body language, we can sort of tell how the feel in the room is going, all those kinds of things. And there's some things you need that. But if I need to pull my principals together to ask a quick question for 20 minutes, I'll do a Teams meeting for that. That'll save them time, it'll keep them in their building. I think parent-teacher conferences, we've done a lot of those virtually this year, and those have been very high. I think that's something I might try to make as an option for our parents, especially those that commute and that kind of thing. So there's some things that we'll keep. This worked well. I think we're all looking forward to the day that we can get back to Cognia and we actually bring that team into our community. But the team will be 5 to 7 members, including a lead evaluator. And I'm not sure, have y'all been assigned your lead evaluator yet? Okay.
We have not.
Okay, so you'll be assigned the lead evaluator soon, and you'll start communicating with them. And they also help, back to your question, Ms. Little, they also help you with the pacing, that lead evaluator, and where you are and making sure that you're going to be ready. That's part of their piece, to have that team ready for y'all and y'all ready for them. The review will be virtual. It's a Sunday through a Wednesday, and I did make a note on here that y'all will need to ask for the 3-day review. The virtual reviews have been scheduled for 5 days, and the first time I saw that, when I had agreed to serve on one, I really questioned that, because that's an entire week, and most people are people who are still, you know, working in school systems, etc. And so the last one I did was a 3-day, and they had requested a 3-day, and it worked just fine. I could not imagine doing that virtually for 2 more days. So just that would be something y'all would need to request. What will the schedule look like? The team will actually come together virtually on Sunday evening. Usually, that's what I've done with the 3 that I've been on, and we kind of get a game plan. We've met before that. The team will meet virtually before that. When they start getting your information and talking about it, they'll divide things up, because there's so many standards. They'll look at it. You kind of handle the learning piece, and you look at this, and they'll review that. They'll come together, kind of talk about where they are at that point. Then Monday morning, the review starts virtually. And the lead evaluator has set up all the links. So in that schedule that you'll get, there will be links to each meeting. And everybody will click on the appropriate link. The team will be there. The superintendent will give an overview of the district and the district's improvement journey. Like, how have we approached this? What are we doing? But also a little bit about Lawrence 55. Again, because it's about telling a story, and you're trying to personalize it virtually, and it does work, y'all. I was very skeptical the first one I was on, but when I finished it, it was a large high school in Wilmington, North Carolina. But I really felt like I really did have a pretty good feel of that school when we left, of all the people that we talked to. And so that will happen. Then that day, after that brief, introduction. Different groups will be interviewed, the district leadership, finance folks, curriculum folks, student services, special ed, all those folks will be interviewed in small groups. And again, they'll have a link, they'll show up in that meeting, and somebody from that team, usually 2 of the team members, will be interviewing, and 2 will be interviewing another group simultaneously. And so pretty much the Monday is spent that way, with having interviews with leadership. The board members will be interviewed, and y'all will be interviewed in small groups so that we won't have a quorum, because this is information gathering as part of this process. So you will be interviewed, and I'll share some of the questions that are routinely asked in some of these meetings. But now the team members, the engagement review team, can ask about anything that they have access to. Okay, but I will be honest with you, their role in interviewing you is to get an idea of, from that governing body perspective, what your expectations are. Do you understand your role? What do you contribute? In your opinion, what are the things the district does really, really well? What are some areas you feel like maybe we could improve upon? If you could use one word to describe Lawrence District 55, what would that one word be? And I'm going to ask y'all that again at the end, okay? So don't be thinking about it. But and then we ask every group that. Students, what's one word that describes your school? What's one word, parents, that describes your child's school? And you'll be surprised that what we learn from that. Those kinds of questions you'll be asked. On Tuesday, more interviews with school leaders, students, teachers, parents, stakeholders from all levels, like elementary, middle school, high school. So when they finish the day on Tuesday, and most of the time the lead evaluators in the exit review that happens, or presentation that happens, they will tell you how many people they interviewed. And sometimes it's amazing how many people we actually talk to. And so Wednesday, there's a follow-up on the questions and all. The team is working pretty much. And if maybe there was something somebody said in the interview that one of the team members wanted a little more information on, they would go to your main contact, which I think is going to be Dr. Brink, and they would say, hey, we had this question about so-and-so, can you give us some more information about it, that kind of thing, because they're trying to finish up their work tied to the evidence that they have here, what they have found, and that you've provided for them, and get a presentation ready for the superintendent or a call board meeting. And that is something y'all would just have to decide. The couple that I've done, the lead evaluator and team met with the superintendent and maybe one other leadership person from the superintendent's cabinet. Another one wanted it more traditional. Before this protocol, there was always a call board meeting at the end of the review, usually at 3:30 in the afternoon on a Wednesday. Call board meeting just like today. The lead evaluator's sitting here giving you the information. The team members are here. And you can do it that way virtually if you so choose to do it that way. And again, this is their recommendation, so they will present that recommendation to the Global Commission. So that's sort of what it looks like. There's a lot of coordination with the virtual, I'll just be honest with y'all, and making sure that with, if I'm going to interview students from Ford or Sanders or Graycourt, whatever school it is, they have to be ready. The team who's assigned to that click in, and of course with students there's an adult in the room talking to the students. That is probably the most challenging thing I found about it, is making sure people get on the right link to join the meeting, because I was on last one and we had too many board members in the same link, so we had to pause a minute and get everybody in the right place, and it worked. But it does work, and they're made a decision, Cognia did, that for this next year all of them would be virtual. What will the exit presentation look like? The lead evaluator will introduce the team, or have the team introduce themselves. The lead evaluator will be from out of state. The associate lead evaluator will be from in-state. And that's by design. Someone, that's not in our system, that can be, very, non-biased and objective. And then somebody from the state that, when maybe the team starts to have a conversation, so we'll know in South Carolina, this is what, we do. And then you'll have 3 other members of the team. They could be from college level. They could be, administrators from other districts who are trained on the Cognia protocol, and everyone has to have the training, obviously, and there's several benchmarks that they have to meet to be on that team. One thing that will not happen this year, and this is not in the exit, but that did not happen this year and it won't happen next year, is on day 2, after all those interviews they had on day 1, they went to schools. And they had a walk and talk for about 10 minutes with the principal, say it's 2 members, and then they divided up. You go in all odd number rooms, I'll go in all even number rooms, or as many as we can, maybe not all. And we do what's called an Elliott observation in the classroom, and we're gathering data on that observation, which our teachers are familiar with. That doesn't happen. So that will not happen. It's not done virtually. It's just omitted for this virtual experience that we're having. So the evaluator will give a brief overview of the team's visit, what they did, who they spoke to, etc. This might be when they say we interviewed X number of people, so forth. And then they will talk about themes. And this is something that's fairly new. What did we find? What kept reoccurring? We kept hearing about, these themes that kept coming up, and some of them will be commendations, some of them will be recommendations, and they'll give you the preliminary IEQ score. which is that index of education quality. And then that's the end of that presentation for the review, and then you wait the official accreditation report. Okay, so the process and the outcomes, the accreditation engagement review. Any questions about it? Any thoughts, observations? Okay, the interviews. The team members ask and sample of questions. I was just going to try to.
How are our community stakeholders chosen? Does that include parents, or does that include just at-large community members?
It depends. It usually the schools are asked to recommend stakeholders like parents or volunteers, or if they have business partnerships, and they're asked to recommend folks that would be able to contribute and that are involved enough to know. And usually with this virtual platform that we're doing at the district level, we would have that list maybe from all the schools, and we would just try to create a diverse list of folks to invite to be part of that. The parents, you will have a representative group of elementary parents and a representative group of middle school, and then of course the high school. And I've seen it where they schedule those separately. That way you'll have the elementary, middle, and high. And then the teachers are also selected by the principal usually to participate in those interviews. Students are pre-selected, of course, so that we can have them there. You're just looking at basically, you know, if it's at the high school, I'd probably want a 9th grader, 10th grader, 11th grader, 12th grader, some diversity, make sure it's a good representation of our student body. The administrators play a big role in determining who those stakeholders are.
Does that not influence your feedback you get?
Well,
No, I would be
you want to have, if we were face-to-face, I'll tell you how it works. With students, if I'm a team member, I may be given 2 or 3 cards. And if I hand that card to the student, it's going to say meet in room so-and-so at such and such time. And they go. So it's completely random. And every teacher you talk to in a face-to-face is considered an interview. Maybe I observed your class, I did my 20 minutes in there, then I wanted to go over to the side and have a conversation with you. I record that, take notes. You know, and then there's also the formal teacher group, so you've got both to kind of look at, but the virtual piece, you just have to predetermine who those are. That's a really good question. Let's see. And I told Dr. Brink I'll share some of this with her, show her where it is actually located. But for example, here's some questions, examples. In what ways are you, the governing board, engaged in the school's continuous improvement efforts? Describe your level of involvement with engagement in the schools and the institutions. What policies are in place to monitor the school's initiatives on continuous improvement? So you see every question goes back to that buzzword, continuous improvement. And then a lot of times, y'all, if I'm one of the folks interviewing, you know, board members, I was a superintendent. I've worked with boards for years. Is, you know, I want to know, do you serve in this role to help the schools improve, and what is your view of improvement? Does that make sense? I want to know when I walk away, that board member really understands their role, which is that governing body, and that they are to support, as well as sort of give that vision of where they want this district to go, and then the administrators carry that out. So those are the kind of things. I love to ask the question about, what are some things you think you do really well as a school district? And then what are some things that you think that are challenges for your school district? Those challenges sometimes turn into those pieces that are the recommendations. And if you ask that to a number of groups, the same question, if I'm hearing from the board and from a group of parents and maybe a group of teachers that these are the things we really do really well, and here's some things that we need to work on, there's probably some evidence somewhere that would support that. Okay? So I'll share some of these with her. The interviews are usually about 30 minutes, but that's something you work out with the lead evaluator. And like for y'all, they will be virtual. It'll probably be a couple at a time, and there'll be probably two of the committee members, review team, working with y'all on that. Now keep in mind those standards on leadership. If you want to look at that one more time. What time is it? Are we good? What time? Okay. The questions about the governing body and leadership, everybody, like if you look at the 1.3 that we looked at, it says all governing authority members operate under a written code of ethics that identifies principles of conduct and ethical standards within the institution. All governing authority members participate in ongoing professional development beyond the statutory required trainings to stay current and informed regarding applicable laws, regulations, and organizational best practices. Now that's at the engagement level. And so when we're looking at this, all those stakeholder groups that we said are going to participate in looking at us, how we rank on these standards, every stakeholder group is going to be evaluating that. So teachers will talk about they'll be asked about the governing body and do we work in this way and did we participate in ongoing professional development. The administrators will be asked that. The community members will be asked that. And so if we determine that that's at a pretty high level, then we would say, what evidence do we have? So beyond the statutory requirement, which is when you're elected to the board, you have to go through the School Boards Association training, that initial time, and after that, it's really up to the board and the board members to decide how much more training they want. Some boards, and I don't know if y'all do this or not, some boards use an evaluation instrument where they evaluate themselves as a board and how they function. I know that you've got codes of ethics, and those things are in policy. Policies clearly identify and actions support the legal and organizational roles of the responsibilities of the governing board. Policies and practices provide institution leadership, the autonomy for day-to-day operations of the institution. Now, what is that one right there saying? On the page 3, policies clearly identify and actions support the legal and organizational roles and responsibilities of the governing authority. Policies and practices provide institution leadership for the autonomy for day-to-day operations of the institution. So your policies are in line with the legalities that they must meet, and all of them are, because they're vetted before they're ever reviewed. They're vetted and reviewed by the legal folks, attorneys, before you pass them. But this is saying, here's what we do, and here's what the administration does. They're the day-to-day operations of our school district. So everybody would be looking at that. And the next one, processes to collect and use evidence to evaluate the governing authority's adherence to the Code of Ethics and roles and responsibilities. That piece there is, how do you make sure that you are, as a board, serving at a very high level and functioning at a high level? And how many of you do the trainings with the association, the School Boards Association? I know everybody did the initial one, but they have different levels of training and all. So those are the kinds of things. Keep in mind that you will not be a part of this rating. You know, that's the staff and the schools and the other stakeholders. You're part of this process as the interview, is when you're interviewed with that team. Any questions about that? Any thoughts about it? And then I was just gonna go, and some of the other questions, y'all, are very similar. Even though we may be talking to a board member, we may be talking to district leadership and school leadership, we want to make sure everybody understands this piece and where they are and their role and how they support the continuous improvement, how they support the mission and the vision of the district. And then here are some resources that I know Dr. Brink has access to. That extranet Cognia is huge. Everything you would want to know and need is there. I did mention that the Elliott diagnostics or the Elliott observations will not occur this year. There are diagnostics that have to be administered. There are surveys about perception, and there are surveys about experiences. This survey tells you what I've experienced as a parent, as a student, as a teacher in the school district. This survey gives the perception that those stakeholders have of the school district, okay? And you can choose to do some of those. You can choose to do both of them. You can choose to administer more than one time. And to think about this as a continuous improvement process, ideally, some of those surveys, maybe not all of them, periodically you would give each year just to see how do we compare. Okay, this was the perception 3 years ago. What is the perception now? The accreditation and the certification, accreditation support, standards and key concepts, all of those resources are there. I was going to mention there's, like I said, it's not a gotcha and you have to be perfect on every one of these standards, because we're not. It's about that improvement. But if we don't look into it deeply, we won't know where we are to move forward. So there's no like cut score, as I mentioned, but there are some things you have to sign off on that are assurances. And those kinds of things are things like you have a policy manual that is current and updated, that you have safety plans in place and crisis prevention plans, all of those kinds of things. The superintendent just signs off saying we have these. Those are the musts that you have to have. And there's no evaluation of them. It's either you have them, you have to have a strategic plan, those kinds of things, and you just kind of walk through that, and all of us have those things, so those would not be a problem. Personnel manuals, those kinds of things. So I'm not going to ask y'all to do this because I know this is a lot of information, and y'all have listened to me talk for a long time, but I hope it's been helpful. I was going to ask you some things you learned about the accreditation process today, and some things that maybe surprised you about it. So you can think about those on your own and have those conversations as a board with your superintendent. You know, what did we learn about today? What did I learn about that process that I didn't know? Last time I was here, I was a board member, and we went through it, and it looked a little bit different than it does now. And things maybe that surprised you about it, or other questions that you might have. So at this time, I'm going to just open it up and see if any of you have questions. Dr. Thomas, if there's anything you would like to add to this, just kind of debrief for a minute.
Dr. Pruitt, first I would like to say thank you for being here today to share this information. But also, as you were going through the process, I have served on a few teams in other schools and other districts, and it seems very similar.
Mm-hmm.
But what would you say is probably that main takeaway as far as the difference between the new protocol versus how it was advanced ed when I went through it?
That's a really good question. I think the biggest difference is you have choices. In the prior protocol, you had to do, it was very lockstep. This, with it being based on continuous improvement, we're all at different places. We have different needs. We have different goals and aspirations based on where we are. And so there's choices like the surveys I mentioned. Those are optional. You can use the surveys that you already give without having to administer those. The data that you submit is completely up to you now. So I would say the biggest change in the protocol is having more choices. And I have seen it where y'all, like what you submit is even different. One school district submitted every one of these that every school did. The next school district I was on submitted one for the district. Every school district probably goes through and rates themselves and comes up with a matrix. Some school districts submitted that to the team so that as a team member, we're thinking you're here, but they think they're here. Do you see what I'm saying? That used to was automatic. You had to submit that self-assessment. And so that team knew where you thought you were before they got there. Now you can do that or you cannot do that. So that's just the decision you have to make. So I would say that's the biggest change is there's more flexibility and there are more choices on how you approach it.
Thank you.
Mhm. Any other questions?
I don't necessarily have a question, but I just have a comment. First of all, thank you for coming to present this for us today. I think it's tedious work, but I think the fact that our district is required to go through this every 5 years and do such a deep dive on all levels, I think it's so important so we do recognize the things that we're doing well and the things that we may need to improve on. And I'm intrigued because this is my first time on the board during an accreditation process, I would be intrigued to see, from where were we 5 years ago on the needs to improve and how have we been able to improve those things within this 5-year period.
Right.
So I think it's a great tool, and I appreciate you going through the time to explain it to us.
Yes, ma'am. Well, I appreciate y'all having me, and if you have any other questions, I'll be glad to take them. I do want to thank y'all for the opportunity. This is a very strong school district, and you don't need me to come from outside and tell you that. You know you have a strong district, and it's recognized as such, and you have great leadership. So this process is going to be a positive experience, I think, and if we approach it from the standpoint of we're just trying to improve, just trying to get better. It's a lot of work, like you said, but I think it will be beneficial to the district. So thank y'all. Thank you, Dr. Thomas, for inviting me back, and thank you, board members. I appreciate it, and thank y'all for your service as a board member. Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no other questions, then we're at a time we can adjourn our meeting if we have a motion to do so.
Sure.
Is there a second?
Did I hear a motion?
Who made the motion?
Mr. Hughes.
Okay.
Oh, I know, I didn't
Made a
hear
motion.
anything. I'm like, okay.
It's kind
I
of
think
loud
I've got
back here
this
with
on.
this. Yeah, you're on, I think.
I think, Mr. Carpenter, you second? I'll second. All right.
All right. All those in favor? All right. We're adjourned. Thank you.